at the right color temperature.
Afterwards, it comes to me in code enforcement.
Right.
And then I do a notice of violation. And if it's been installed without a permit, then it goes back to development services.
How many people like you does the city employ?
I think we have 11 of us, but I'm there to teach and I think they're supposed to be getting more.
Okay.
That's why I'm here, is to take back.
Code enforcement is broad, so that includes, people not cutting their grass.
Weeds and trash. But I understand on new installs, fixture manufacturers, if it's required, that's a whole different, and I'm not that I'm looking at from the code enforcement side. You know, I get the complaint, the neighbor doesn't like it. Sometimes it's just because it's different than what it was and they're not used to the brightness. But if I can get a cut sheet from that owner who bought it at one of the big box stores, that's my area looking. If it's, multiple, I can then require them to lower it. And hopefully the neighbor will be happy. But if they're in compliance, I have to close the case and the neighbor has to suffer.
Current code is 3,500, is that correct?
The current code is 3,500 K is as cool as the light can be.
You spec a lot of fixtures. What do you see as the spectrum of availability?
The most prevalent that is compliant with that regulation is 3,000 Kelvin. That's in most outdoor lighting manufacturers, we see the products available 3,000 K, 4,000, 5,000.
Thousands or 500 increments is what I've seen.
Actually, more the 1,000 increment. We're not seeing a whole lot of availability of 3,500 anymore. And there is increased availability of warmer light sources, easily available in things like architectural lighting, like recessed can lights that might be used in the external canopies and things. Those are typically available 2,700 K. In traditional outdoor lighting fixtures, though, for parking lot lighting and higher lumen output wall-mounted lights for area lighting, the warmer sources are not as available, although more product is becoming available. I guess I'd like to delve into this issue a little more of what we were trying to do in the draft and where I think we need some help from our consultant to be able to get this thing resolved. A subcommittee has recognized that we're losing the battle on color temperature. Every day, high pressure sodium lamp or a low pressure sodium lamp is being taken out of service. Those are relatively good sources for dark sky because they have very little blue light on a percentage basis compared to other light sources. Since the code went into, since we had the 2012 code, we had the 3,500 K regulation, and then with the prevalence of 3,000 K lights being available, my sense is that people in the electrical industry are equating 3,000 Kelvin as being good lighting and being dark sky friendly and all that. And I personally believe it is not. I think our dark sky is getting totally ruined by it right now.
So this is Buell. I just want to second that. We had it at 3,500 because we wanted to encourage 3,000, which was the lowest available at the time. We set it at 3,500.
Mhm.
If there had been a lot at 2,500 available, we would have wanted to set it at 2,500. So it was a compromise. But I agree, because that was legal, people assume that means it's good as opposed to least damaging.
Yeah, and it's anecdotal, but to this day, I'm seeing 3,500 going, and the most noteworthy is the University of Arizona, which is not regulated by our code. They relit the mall, and they probably tripled at least the light level in the mall. And they went from 3,000, well, of course, it was low pressure sodium years ago. Then they went to 3,000 Kelvin, and now I think it might be 3,500 or it might be 4,000 Kelvin. And it is bright, bright, bright. And there's just more of this blue light going up into the sky. And when the blue light goes up, it comes back down. And the red light doesn't. So that's what I think we need to do something about it. And I think those of us on the technical side of the committee have been trying to address that. Another thing that we can't lose sight of is the fact that lumens are not the same for every type of light fixture. And when the 2012 code was written, it was based on the assumption that the majority light was sodium lamp inside a light fixture, and we were using lamp lumens in the calculation. When the LED product became prevalent, it's not calculated the same way. And if you take an LED product that has the same rated lumens as a sodium, you end up with more light. But there's disagreement amongst people as to what that factor is.
But, well, this is Buell again. It's not just this disagreement about what the factor should be. I think there's just a general challenge for everybody who's involved when we've been having the same discussion for 4 years now. So I appreciate you highlighting it. How do we adapt to the new technology? How do we adjust either the lumen caps or some other part of the code to reflect the fact that the lighting fixtures have changed? That's what we've been wrestling with.
And I think on committee, we came up with a idea to use an 80% factor. So if 2012 says 100,000 lumens per acre, for only that adjustment and no other purpose, then it should go to 80,000 lumens per acre to try to keep parity. But the point is, it doesn't keep parity because we're taking the 100,000 lumens of high pressure sodium, which is less damaging to the sky. And now we're still talking about putting in, if it's 80,000 lumens of 3000 K, there's significantly more blue light coming out of that system. So we have not achieved parity by doing that. So the question is, how do we address that? Then I came up with the idea that the way we could address it is to actually try to put factors and rank different light sources based on either it being an LED narrow bandwidth amber, phosphor coated amber, very low Kelvin temperature like 2200 K, 2700 K, 3000 K. And we could assign ratings and even assign ratings to the legacy sources, high pressure sodium, metal halide, fluorescent, incandescent. And all it would be is a simple multiplication to adjust the lumens of whatever type of fixture you're putting in. And that adjusted lumens are then the lumens that you use for that fixture when you total them up and compare it to the lumen cap. And I know that went over like a lead balloon because everybody says they don't understand it and it's too complicated, but in reality, it isn't complicated. It's just, you have to have a rudimentary idea of what kind of light you have and have the values that you have to use to do the arithmetic to multiply it. So that's the problem we've had. And maybe our consultant could help with that because what I've heard in analyzing the comments was a lack of confidence that any of the numbers that were thrown out to adjust these, that they're actual real numbers that can be backed up with science. And I'm not a lighting scientist. I'm an application engineer and I'm overworked as it is. I can't do that research. But maybe since we have a consultant, perhaps they could do the research. And my interest would be having them to do that comparison between a legacy fixture and current fixture. What would a good factor be? And then a factor for the effect on sky glow of 3000 K versus lower K ratings all the way down to amber. And if we could somehow get those quantified, then we could adjust the numbers again, and we would have a foundation of a consultant that's giving us data that that, we would evaluate it, of course, but, it's not just Dennis coming up with numbers.
Green, astronomy at University of Arizona. Of course, delighted to hear you say all that because that was the basis of our input to you in the revision of the lumens table. And we're happy to give the consultant a jumpstart with the literature sources that we used to suggest those conversion factors about visibility versus spectral output of the lamp. You invited a comment about different color temperature limits for different lighting areas. And I'd just like to bring that up again as well, because we would, of course, be delighted to see a minimum amount of blue light as you get closest to the observatories. So the question is whether the new code can accommodate some combination of regulation and incentive to have narrower spectral response for the critical zones right around the telescopes. And then, more optional use as we get closer into the city core. So we're talking about narrow band.
Let me interrupt you, Rich,
Sure.
because it does that already. The current code does that and the proposal does it because we have the lighting zones. Or close to the observatories are the E1A, E1B, and E1C. And those in the past, they favored low pressure sodium with higher limits compared to white light sources. And in the proposal, they still favor narrow band amber LED as opposed to white light sources.
Terrific. I mean, I haven't seen the new lumens table. Last time I saw numbers, there was not such an incentive, but that's the intent and that's great. And the other thing I might offer is that, there's a question of acceptance, right? That people want to feel safe and have good color rendition and so on. And so I wonder, in the city of Flagstaff, when they're converting from their old low pressure sodium to some combination of narrow band amber and phosphor converted amber, actually put up a couple of trial intersections and got public feedback on, did they think the color rendition index was sufficient and did they feel it was safe visibility? And so, if we want to create an incentive and create public acceptance, might it be possible to engage our colleagues and have a couple of trial runs with these fixtures before we try to write it into the code and make people adapt.
So this is Buell. Dennis, I want to thank you for the way you described it today, because I think it's the clearest this issue has been described in the last 4 or 5 years. And I also like Richard's suggestion that we try to get some examples or a example of what an intersection looks like, for example, or any other lighting we can get as a function of color, temperature of the fixture.
I would recommend not doing intersection. That's street lighting, which is kind of not the main thrust of this, but certainly parking lot lighting, something of that nature.
I'm just saying an example helps because otherwise people are guessing, and there's a rational concern that people have if they hear something's being lowered or restricted. They associate that means diminished, which means less good, but it might actually be just as good if they see it.
In 2012, we were designing parking lots and putting high pressure sodium lights in them, and they were accepted. They were ordinary, all over the place. And suddenly we're suggesting you could light that with 2200 Kelvin and be pretty close to high pressure sodium in terms of the effect in the dark sky. And suddenly it's like, well, that's no good. We can't do it. We want to keep our 3500 Kelvin light, which
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but I'm just trying, I'm just
so
saying the
much more
suggestion,
blue in it.
the
That's
suggestion
the
of
problem.
showing it to people so they can actually see it is a way of maybe helping to win a communication challenge. Because I agree with you, but we still need to convince people to support this.
You're already taking a lumen hit. I'm speaking for retail and parking lots and senior burger, it's gonna be yellow looking or more yellow looking, but I mean, there's a hit on not only the lumens, there's a hit on the Kelvin, okay? Is the perception.
Yeah, I agree.
It is a
with the
perception,
perception,
okay?
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a converter, like you're saying, you used to have X amount of lights. If you throw it into this converter, it's gonna spit out you're at or above where you were at before. I don't know if there's a way to do that on every single site. But when I first got into this, the perception of two things are going down and how do we maintain, I mean, if I'm selling cars, I don't want a bunch of orange cars I'm selling. I'm gonna want red cars and blue cars and to be able to see a truer color. So how do you prevent that by changing the color light?
So the current code already gives exceptions for things like car dealerships very explicitly.
But let me address that because we pulled that out. The 2012 code exempts outdoor sales from color temperature limits. So presently you can put anything you want. If you want 6,000 K in your car lot, you can do it. We took that out and now outdoor sales would be subject to the color temperature limitation, which we're proposing the upper limit being 3,000 K. So it would go from that.
I'm good with 3,000. I think 3,000 works. We've installed 3,000 and I don't have an issue with that
So,
color of
with-
lighting.
with
But I'm
regarding-
here in 2,700 and we do some mock-ups and maybe it's 2,000. That's where do you stop at?
Well, that's why I'm asking whether actually being able to see something deployed might help as opposed to people asserting or guessing or worrying.
Let me, I heard something there I want to talk about a little bit more because lighting is used for a variety of purposes. And some of it is just utility. Big, vast parking lots, either for retail, or commercial purposes, at hospitals, at manufacturing facilities, whatever. Just parking lots where people get out of their car and then they're going someplace else. I'm not so certain those need high color rendering lights, but yet they're big areas on big commercial jobs and there's a lot of lumens in those. Then you have things like outdoor sales, whether it could, whatever is being sold outdoors, wants to be lighted. There is a requirement for color temperature and for color rendering. So that's a little different animal. You got recreational uses, sports lighting fields and such. There's more requirement for color rendering. So again, we're not proposing to limit that as much, but for general utility lighting, see, that's where you can make a difference and help the dark sky. That's why I was looking toward this graduated system. So say you have a commercial development and you just have big open parking lots. You want them illuminated brightly. You could do that by going to 2200 Kelvin there. But when you need the better color rendition as you approach the entrance to your building, if you have decorative elements on the building, whatever, where you want to use fancier light fixtures that might not be available in the utility fixtures are available in 2200 K. But when you go to decorative, special style of light or whatever, you might only be able to get a 3000 K. So you'd be able to use those. They would take a bigger percentage of your lumen cap compared to if you were at a lower color temperature, but you'd still be able to do it. That's the point of graduating and not just having a cutoff limit. Because I think if we stay with 3000 K to protect the dark sky, we got to bring the lumens per acre down further than we brought it down if we're going to make a difference on that aspect.
So this sounds like an extreme statement, but maybe it'll help indicate the point I'm trying to make. The really bluest light is in some ways junk lumens, useless, because your eye is very sensitive to seeing that. You don't need a lot of that in order to see the blue. And it's the most damaging to the astronomy. So
I get the blue is damaging.
Yeah.
And the other spectrum is the amber is damaging, I believe, in regards to truly what people see.
No, I agree that it diminished, it had, but the amount of blue, it's amazing how little blue your eye can make use of. And then there's other light that's even bluer that's being produced that your eye's not really seeing. And it's hard to control that. And it's hard to control that without requiring a lot of work on the lighting engineer or the lighting installer. So, Rick.
Through my IAI connections and NEMA, I might be able to get some of these manufacturers, more than one, to be able to come and talk to the committees or give input to the committees and maybe possibly put a mock-up so it can be seen to work with manufacturers. I can reach out to them and see what I can find out.
So I'm a fan of having as many of those kinds of things as we can. We have done that back in, I think, when did we have Chris Monrad come and bring the fixtures in? We met at Tucson Metro, one of the meetings. So we have done that before, and it's one of the things that's informed the discussion of what lights are available and how expensive they are. I'm not against doing it again, because there's always turnover. And we need
If you get them to redo them all in different colors,
So I'm working on it. You might have noticed we've had a lot of turnover in our leadership, and I haven't gotten to have my meetings yet.
that's some funding issues.
And funding issues, sure. And lots of government issues nationwide.
So how can we get feedback from our consultant on these issues? Could we have a direct dialogue with them, or does it all go through Dan and you, Clayton? Or?
It does go through us, but we can set up a meeting where we've been trying to arrange something for them to communicate directly with Buell. But my recommendation would be to identify a specific research question or task to give them very focused direction if you're seeking.
Okay, what I'm thinking is I'll try to get our subcommittee to come up with a list of specific questions, and we'll get those out.
So Dennis, I like the one you said earlier. Sorry.
We do have several questions. Desires.
So I like the one you said earlier, Dennis, about what is the right factor. You have the LED. If the goal is to keep the growth from blue light by switching to an LED fixture below some value to be suggested by the subcommittee, what should the factor be on the lumen cap?
Yeah, so I mean, I already had a list of questions that I wrote up some time ago. I thought I had more copies here. I think maybe I didn't bring them. I think our subcommittee should meet.
Is it within the open meeting law to allow all the committee members to send in suggested questions to the subcommittee? That's not a meeting, it's just,
Sure.
okay, so,
Hey, if this gets published, we can add or omit.
yeah, so if this could be circulated to the committee members, we could make suggestions to the subcommittee
Okay,
of additional questions without
Okay.
taking a lot of time now.
I'll go ahead and do that. And I do have one extra copy I can leave with. We should probably keep things going here. Let's see. Item 6, discussion on curfew and automatic timers. Consider any proposed changes to section 403 and or limitation on motion detectors. Let me start out by saying that, we've had a curfew in 2012. Providing turnoff times for outdoor illuminated signs. Providing a turnoff time for unshielded light. And turnoff time on recreation lighting. And turnoff times on outdoor special uses, which would be like manufacturing or sales, like car dealer lights. So we've already got all those curfews, and we haven't really proposed any changes to those in any of our subcommittee work. But I've put in the proposal, and it's in the draft, to add the requirement to have occupancy or motion sensing on large area outdoor lighting such as parking areas. And what that would do is have the effect of if there's no activity sensed within those areas, it would have the lights dim to a value of, I forget the number, if it was a third or 50%. But the point is there's commercially available equipment now that is relatively easy to get on most fixtures that are used for parking lot lighting that has the ability to sense if there's activity and then bring the light up to full brightness. But if there isn't any activity, then it would dim them. It doesn't turn them off, but it would just dim. And the basis for that is that, you know, as you get later in the evening, there's an awful lot of lit parking lots that have just nothing going on in them. They're empty, but they're lit. In the old days, we used to design multiple timers on parking lot with the idea that owners might want to leave a couple lights on, but darken the rest of it to, you know, save on their electric bill or whatever. Nobody operates parking lots like that. They turn everything to run all night long, and they're empty and they're lit up all night long. And so by having a motion sensor, you know, for all this would apply to new installations only, but retrofitted, it would reduce the amount of lumens and therefore the sky glow from all these areas that don't have activity in them. And so that was the proposal that has gone into the draft. The other thing is there's some technologies available to do that, and some of the manufacturers have what you'd call like a mesh network type of communication, so that you put this sensor device on every pole, and so you get the censoring, but they can all talk to each other. And so you could trigger one and it can turn the whole parking lot on if you program it to do so. So I've proposed that we actually have a rule that you cannot do that. Because if you had a big, large parking lot, you have one activity in one little area, you don't want to necessarily turn on the whole parking lot. So the proposal was the most you could do is your pole, your sensing, and the adjacent poles around them could be turned on. And that would prevent having like a great big shopping center turn every light up just because in one corner you've got a little activity.
That sounds, that sounds fantastic to me. I have no idea how easy or hard that is. Is that the kind of thing we can ask the consultant? I don't know if this is in their area.
It's commercially available product that all the major lighting manufacturers have.
There's a
The kind
cost.
of lights.
There's a
Yeah,
cost.
how much is?
There is some cost. I think it's around $100 a fixture. So it would add some cost. Now, the thing is though,
Say something.
you'd get some of that back because you're gonna get a longer lifespan out of your equipment because you're not driving the LEDs as hard, and you're gonna save energy. And you know, energy costs keep rising.
So is asking the consultant to take a representative size parcel and calculate what the savings is or is not a reasonable question?
I think if that's something that we need to be able to sell this issue, then that would be a reasonable question. And I hadn't thought of asking. them that.
So the
Yeah.
reason I don't want to say, ask them to calculate everything.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to bankrupt the city and the county, but concrete specific examples that can help build common understanding of the relative cost of some of these choices, I think would be really helpful,
Mhm.
because some of these things might be easier than we think and some might be harder.
That is good.
Yeah, data is good.
I think in the ask to the consultant, where's the data coming from? I don't think the cost thing, but if it's in regards to color renditions, we need different sets of where that data comes from and not a single source.
Yeah. The good news is, Spiel again, the good news is there are multiple sources, so.
I think what we do need to prevent, this is correct, Bern. I think what we do need to prevent against is from the suppliers, the manufacturers are making multiple source LED drivers to change from a 5K to a 4K to a 3K. You know, and we need to prevent against that because there's no reason why, you know, if the owner decides they want a little bit bluer light, well, they get up there and change that, you know, that's an additional cost. But I think a lot of it comes from the installation guys don't really focusing on whether it's supposed to be 3K or 5K. And you see parking lots, I mean, there's different colors coming out of those fixtures. So we need to do a little bit, you know, look into that and see how, you know, how much of that the manufacturers are actually doing in the fixtures.
So I'll comment on that. My sense is that the manufacturers are definitely going to fixtures that have the field adjustable light outputs and color temperatures. And I think it's being done because it must be relatively easy to implement from a manufacturing point of view. And it vastly simplifies their product offering. Instead of having to actually have multiple products, they can build one, and then by just moving a dip switch that's internal in the fixture, you can change it from 3000K to 4000 or 5000, or change it from 3000 lumens to 4000 to 5000. They have those choices now. And it's not just outdoor lighting that's doing it, interior lighting. In fact, it's more an interior than exterior. The only thing I can say is that there's a process on lights going in, being installed. You have to get a permit. Get a permit, they have to submit plans that say what the design is. So the design is specifying a certain color temperature, it's specifying a certain fixture output rating, you know, wattage or whatever. And if that meets code, then that's what needs to be installed. So then the next step is inspection. And that's something that inspectors will have to look at is it installed per the plans? Now, I do some special inspections on occasion, and I can tell you that installers just, they don't get it. They don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. They take it out of the box and they put it up on the wall. That's what happens. But the process, if you have the inspection part of it, then that needs to be addressed at that point.
There may be a problem with that, Clayton. Please back me. If they're just taking a fixture off the wall and putting it on the wall, there's no new electric ram to it. I don't believe there's a permit required, is there?
There's not, unless, this is Clayton, unless it's an outdoor light.
An outdoor light, it will require permits.
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. I did not realize that.
Back to, it's Rob, back to inspection. How do you measure if you're on the ground post installation what the kelvins are? Can you?
I'll tell you how I do it. It's right here.
Visually. You have to see enough of them.
So I can explain the process that we use for special inspections. The first thing we do is when we get hired to do a special inspection, we ask to get a copy of the approved plans. And the only time I might not ask for that is if I'm inspecting one of my own projects, because I've already got the plans and I know what it's supposed to be. But in most cases, we do that. We actually study the plans to see, you know, what all the outdoor lights are. Then we also ask to get a copy of the lighting submittals, because oftentimes the light fixture that's on the plan is not the fixture that the contractor buys. They substitute to a different manufacturer. So then we review the submittals and we see if those submittals actually comply to what's on the plans. If we have plans that look like they don't meet code, if we have submittals that look like they don't meet what's on the plans or don't meet code, and this is something that governmental agencies don't see. We go back to the customer that hired us and we said, we're not going to do the inspection until you get the thing compliant, because your permit is you're supposed to install A, B, and C, and you're not doing that. So usually there's a delay, and then they finally come back and they say, okay, we're okay. Or else they say, well, we go out and inspect it anyway. So then we go out and inspect it and it doesn't pass. And so they've wasted their money having us go look at it. So then we physically go out and look at it. And because we can, you got some experience in eyeballing, the lights. Is it 3000K or isn't it? And it's pretty easy to tell. And one thing that does help on that is the city relamped all the street lights to 3000 Kelvin.
Yeah,
And so that's a good reference point. How does this installation compare to the street lighting system? Now, that's not a perfect thing because there are some problems with the street lighting system. And some of you might have seen like the purple lamps and things. There's some color shift going on in that system.
voltage drop or fixtures are getting old or?
I don't think its voltage drop has much of an effect on it. It has more to do with the phosphors that are on the LED. So if you get voltage drop, you might get lower light output. There's some problem with the phosphor changing.
And that changes the color,
Because what happens is the LED actually itself emits more blue light. And then it hits the phosphors, which absorb that blue light energy, and then they re-emit light at a warmer color temperature. So if the phosphors come off, then you don't have your 3000K anymore. So yeah, we look at them all, and sometimes we find that the fixtures they said they're going to put in that's on the submittals are not what was there. That's why we got the submittal thing, so we can compare what we see. We almost never get up on a ladder and are looking, putting it up, that we're not doing that. But, I have to sign in the inspection form that it complies with code and it was built for the approved plans. That has been a big hiccup because there's been a lot of approved plans that don't comply with code. And that needs to get fixed.
There's also been supply chain issues. So something that's specified may not even be available. So you have to go to a different source anyways.
The biggest problems that we see are out-of-town designers that don't understand what our code is asking for and don't want to understand it. And developments that are using like a national account type procurement for their light fixtures. And that's a lot of fast food places where I can't think of one that we've approved the first time we go out and look at it. And sometimes they're just grossly wrong. Like every single light is 4000 Kelvin. The plans say 3000. Even
Well,
the metals they give us say 3000. Go out and look at it, it's all 4000.
I have a canned email that has,
Well, no question
all the
that
dark
versus
sky
that.
information on it.
Well, yeah,
I have to send out.
because that looks like it's 3000. That looks like it might be 35 or 4. So here you can see the difference between what the different color temperatures are in the fluorescence up here, which is essentially the same in the LED.
But in the nighttime environment, it's a little bit different
Yeah.
because most of the commercial projects that need the outdoor lighting inspection, they tend to be along public streets that are illuminated with 3000K LEDs. So you've got a good comparison, and because it's hard just looking at these two, is that one 35? I think that's warmer than 35. So I think Craig's right. I think this one is 3000 and I think that one is 3500.
Well, that might even be 4K too,
It might be, but I think it's 3500.
35, right?
I think-
I'll point out that when you look at what's being illuminated, you can't see color patches.
No, I'm looking at the lamp.
Right.
Yeah, you gotta look at the lamp.
Yeah, so it's not just what gets emitted, it's also what gets reflected, and how sensitive your eye
Now, I
is.
think being able to know the difference between a PC amber and a narrow band amber, that's gonna be a tough nut
Good luck.
to know the difference. Because they're gonna look the same.
At least in the Flagstaff nighttime experiment, they really don't.
They don't look the same.
PC Amber has a color rendition index, upwards of 50%. And so it's really quite good. Whereas narrowband amber looks like you remember low pressure sodium, it's very orangey. And so that's why I'm hoping.
Well, that's my lack of experience and I haven't.
I'm hoping we can see some PC amber, at night because it's, it doesn't have that blue component, but the color rendition is not bad.
Road trip to Flag.
I agree with Dennis, training and experience. I myself can say I mean, I can look at, on a different example, I used to go look at gym show lighting. And you have to look at the bulb. Well, how do you look at a 100-watt bulb and determine if it's 100? So your eyes, you can train yourself to not see, but look across and do it. But it takes training, learning and stuff. And that's something that we can work on with the inspection agencies, is to try and get some training to understand what they're looking at and what they should be looking for.
I'm not aware of any instruments that are available to really tell us color temperature. There are, I'm just not aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, we can bother fuel in a sec, but I think there are portable spectrometers that give you a nice, a quick rendition of that. It's because I recall seeing those in one dark sky meeting. I don't know how field ready they are or how expensive or anything like that. They certainly exist.
Guarantee they're not cheap.
Any other issues on the item 6? Yes, item 6. 13 timers. Item 7.
Richard,
Sorry.
is this the time for public comments or is that?
Yeah, that's coming up. So we got one. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Kevin Crumwitty. I live on the west side. We touched on, in the last section, you mentioned the difficulty of understanding things like color temperature and lumens and conversion factors. If this is something that experts debate, it's much more difficult to communicate to homeowners. And in my opinion, the most important change in the draft code is the new exception that's made for motion sensors. I think that's much easier to communicate. And I don't know what percentage of the overall light pollution is residential. My perspective, my concern is residential. But I think that's easier to communicate. That could be easier to enforce. And I think it would unburden inspectors as well, because it's much more black and white. Is this light, was it permitted after a certain date? Is it on a motion sensor? No, then that would be a violation. I know it's optional in the code, but personally, I would like to see that more emphasis be placed on that. I think it would have the potential to reduce the overall light emission, especially in residential areas. If going forward, lights were required to be on motion sensors. They're cheap, they're readily available. I think that's.
So if I could make a comment on it though, I think one of the problems I see with the cheap commercially available motion sensor lights is that they tend to be glare bombs. They tend to have floodlights attached to them that are aimable in every direction. And they're oftentimes aimed up and too high. And they're the very thing that's making lighting complaints when, this bright glary light keeps coming on and off. I mean, we haven't spent a lot of time in subcommittee debating that with residential, but perhaps we need to go around it one more, because I agree we should have the motion sensor, or give an allowance that if you do that, maybe you don't have to do as many calculations, whatever. But using the commercially available fixtures that can be aimed up too high, they don't really achieve the light trespass limits that we're trying to do, and they don't help the dark sky when they are up. Also, many of them are 4,000 and 5,000 K color temperature because they're inexpensive products, and you can buy them over the internet from areas that aren't regulated.
Yeah, but what may need to be studied is what percentage of the time would they be on, given that there's the requirement that they're not sensitive outside your own property. If they're only on 5% of the time or something, that would be an immediate
Anecdotal, but on a windy night, they can be on a lot.
Well, so a comment, I like the suggestion, and I think we should think it through a little bit, because what he was emphasizing was maybe the public would find this easier to understand and accept. And so it could be that you have two options. You say, basically the direction the code's already going, but it could be you don't want to keep track of your lumen cap. You don't want to understand census of how many lights you have. If it's full cutoff, that addresses your point, and has a timer, a motion sensor, then you get, and a color temperature,
Then it could be
then
exempted.
then it
from
could be
caps.
exempted from the cap. And so, I mean, we should.
That would be easy to apply. You'd have wide acceptance of that because.
So that's the
people
reason
wouldn't
we
have to
should at
do-
least think about
That's
it.
why people wouldn't have to do calculations.
Right.
Which is what they wonder.
The problem being is from a local consumer standpoint, purchasability, those fixtures are hardly available at all. Costco doesn't sell them, Sam's Club doesn't sell them,
Hardware.
Ace doesn't sell them. You can't find, the only place you go is maybe a Lowe's or a Home Depot that might have a hooded fixture, whether it's on an arm or however it might be. But very seldom are those residentially, can you find them at all?
I was afraid someone would be realistic, but I still think we should try. We should at least put it on the list of things to verify that your initial thoughts are right.
I mean-
You're probably right.
Yeah, I mean, we did this years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we did this 15, 18 years ago, is we actually went to those people to talk to them about those fixtures. They made a change for a while, but now they're back at unshielded stuff.
I remember when High Kaplan, talked to Costco and all they changed their product for a while. And then one time I was through there and there's the 4,000 K lights back in.
Unshielded.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So, one other part of this section that the observatory sent you as a comment that we'd like you to reconsider one of the curfew exceptions for unshielded lighting. And so let me just read this because it's not my text, but,
You have a section that applies to
403.1,
402.1.
which has a list of curfew exceptions for unshielded lights. And so as patriotic as anyone, but this is about bottom lit US flags. And so what we said was US flags are not required to be illuminated if flown at night. And in fact, the US flag code notes that it is the universal custom to display the flag only from sunrise to sunset on buildings and on stationary flag staffs in the open. So that's US code. Since flags aren't required by law to be lit if you fly them, this application shouldn't receive a blanket exception. And also, speaking of commercial availability, there's very good top-down fixtures now for illuminating flags. So you don't really need unshielded bottom-up lighting for flags at all. So we think that this should not be an exception, that you can illuminate flags from the top and should. So we just ask you to reconsider that particular exception.
But we did have that discussion on that.
Okay, so I don't have a current version of the code revision.
I'll send you the latest revision.
Thanks.
that we got.
Okay, the latest revision I had still had it in, so.
There's a discussion about that, and according to a US statute, then if the US flag is flown at night, it must be lit.
I don't think that's actually.
That's not.
Yeah, no,
Agreement here.
yeah, no, I,
Depends on where the data comes from.
Hmm?
Depends on where the data comes from.
well, yeah.
That's great language, so you've already considered it, so sorry about that. That was behind
Change to Dan.
the draft number.
What does it say?
It says it's a new section that was added, 403.6.1, for nighttime illumination of the flag of the United States of America. Flag poles shall be outfitted with a pole top downward illuminating light fixture. Lumens in these fixtures shall be calculated as part of the unshielded, non-full cutoff lighting totals unless the fixture meets the requirements of full cutoff lighting.
You guys put that into account. I appreciate it.
In our curfew section though, and at least what I'm showing is the latest draft, 403.1, exception number 1, it says unshielded, non-full cutoff lighting installed for illumination of flag of the United States of America.
Right.
So we got.
So it looks like in the curfew, we're still exempting unshielding, even though in the other section, we're requiring it to be shielded. So there's a conflict.
Right.
Just a comment on that, most of the top-down fixtures for lighting US flags are solar. So it would be difficult under the curfew to turn them off.
Yeah, and top down should be cut off lighting, so they could go all night. One thing I noticed though, because I looked for commercially available product, most of them tend to be 4,000 or 5,000 Kelvin. And that's just the
They
nature
have
of
the
lighting.
little solar batteries on
Yeah,
top,
right.
and at night they just do the down light.
Yeah, they're not even wired.
They
I
don't
think 4,000 or 5,000 color temperature over light is better than upward
Anything
light.
over. Exactly. Yes, so.
Well, I
One
mean,
step at a time.
If
Yeah,
we
no,
wanted
just
to
for the
encourage
curfew,
that, I
it's just
suppose
a-
we could exempt the
Flag
full,
from the color
full,
temperature,
full
right.
cutoff down light could be exempted from.
That's
the
right.
color
I don't like having every single application have its own special rules because it gets
I-
complicated. But yes, I would vastly prefer having an exception on the color temperature for flags than having the upward light, because the upward light is literally 10 times, 100 times worse than the downward light.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Ken Blumenthal, and I am with the Pima County Small Business Commission, and I'm here as just a stakeholder group. And I first want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. I appreciate it very much. It's an important issue, the lighting codes for the city and the county. I have three comments to make, and each one is laden with a question for you, like, well, what's the status and the like, but since it's a comment period, I'll make them in the comments. In the suggestions of the last public comment period, it was made by a couple of sources to use for the definition of light trespass, the Santa Cruz County definition of light trespass, which seems very straightforward, if not simplistic, but spot on, and that is, quote, no luminaire installed within the county limits shall create conditions of light trespass. So I wanted to bring that up to, has there been any movement on that, on adoption of that? Let me go to my second brief comment here. And it's really a question, but there is a sense or a understanding among many that damaged light shields, even if they were constructed or installed prior to 2012, that they be repaired and brought to code. So there may be cracked, they may have fallen, they may sideways, whatever it is, but allowing light to emit. And so that they should be brought to code if in fact they're damaged, yet they were installed prior to the rigs. The last comment is, and it has to do with something which was just commented on about the upward lighting on flagpoles. Well, in many commercial properties as well as and residential particularly, there's supposed low LED accent lighting, which points up. Could be on trees, could be on Saguaro and others. But nonetheless, it's pointing up, and I'd like clarification on that if those are subject to the anticipated code revisions. And thank you.
Yeah, I can address some of that. If it's outdoor light, it is subject to the code. And landscape lighting is supposed to be compliant with the code. If landscape lighting goes in with the uplight component, it should be it's then subject to the curfew, which means it should be turned off at 11 p.m. It's also supposed to meet color temperature regulations, et cetera, et cetera. It's governed by the code. The reality is, though, a lot of it goes in without permits and isn't very well regulated. And so the only way that gets dealt with is if somebody makes a complaint.
Got it. Thank you.
Regarding the Santa Cruz regulation, just saying light trespass. It's anecdotal again. I live north of Fort Lowell Park, actually north of the Rio River, and I could read a newspaper under the light spill from the ball fields at Fort Lowell Park, that would be light trespass. And the trouble is, if you say there's no light trespass at all, that means absolutely zero. And that is technically impossible to achieve. Even with the best shielding, you're going to get something. I can tell you, I'm aware of other jurisdictions that actually do quantify a certain amount of foot candle level. That, for example, you can have no more than 0.3 foot candles at a property line, something like that. That though requires, if we adopt that, that requires full-blown engineered calculations on every project, which is a big increment of magnitude of extra design costs that, you know, everything's too expensive. It's just going to add more to it. I don't remember the third.
It had to do with the, well, you answered on the accent lighting, or landscape lighting, if you will, and I thank you. The damage shields in the code pre-12, 2012.
I mean, generally, property is supposed to be maintained, et cetera, which is not in the lighting code per se. But I think that would only be addressed if there was a complaint. That could result in that under present rules, and we really haven't addressed that going in the future. I'd like to back up again to this issue of shielding, because there's some things I've been noticing that are really prevalent lately, and we haven't addressed it in subcommittee, and because there's so many other things. But it's so prevalent when you go down any of the major streets. Restaurants, they put up the festoon lights, strings of bear lamps. It's just everywhere. It's happening in neighborhoods. People put them up in their houses, in their backyards, sometimes in their front yards. We've had the exception, and people make the argument, well, they're just seasonal lighting, but they're not. They're there all year long. And for the most part, they're all unshielded. They're not particularly high lumen outputs, but they are lumen outputs. And many of them do tend to have pretty good color temperature. The commercially available products that are using the LEDs are like 2400 Kelvin. Some of them even 2200 Kelvin. So they're not bad. I mean, we just are ignoring it. Technically, they're all violating code. Part of me says that maybe there just needs to be an allowance that, you know, business can do that as long as you turn them off at 11 p.m. or something of that nature. But it could really get out of control if we don't put some kind of limit on it. The second thing that's happening, and I see it because of where my office is and how I drive home every night, some retail businesses are now putting up lights on the inside of their show windows, but the lights are shining outside of the show windows just to draw attention to themselves. And the worst offenders are some of these smoke shops, and but there are other businesses doing it as well. And I mean, they leave them on all night long. So I don't see how they could be legal. Also from the standpoint that most of these businesses would be regulated by other building codes, particularly the energy code for buildings that requires control. And I don't think they can run them all night long unless it's an all night business. But I mean, lighting that's on the interior of the building that doesn't provide illumination on the interior, and it's just pushing it through the front windows to light it up at the outside. It's certainly not in the spirit of what we're trying to achieve, but we don't have any regulation to address that.
Security lighting.
And that would fall on me with code enforcement after a complaint is registered, but before a complaint.
Yeah, but I don't know that you.
Likely was installed without a permit, and we don't know about it until somebody complains.
I don't know that you can touch it, but I mean, there are even buildings that have gone in with permits. For example, certain drugstores have this cavity with a big window on it, that glows all night long and is lit up pretty good. It's above the front door, spilling light out, but it's not really a habitable space. It's just a space that lights, that it gives them the ability to put more light on the store rather than having to say it's outdoor light. I'm seeing self-storage buildings are going up now that has glass windows in the corner of the building, and it's some of the most prominent things you can see now when you're driving around, or I can see it from home looking out at things, and a lot of lights spilling out of the interiors of these buildings, and it's literally on all night long. And perhaps it's exempted from the, and these are brand new buildings. They certainly don't have any control on those lights, even though they're interior, but they may be egress corridors, so technically they're exempted from control. I mean, I got complaints years ago. I did a building at the university that had a great big glass wall on it, and it was a 24-hour building, so the lights were on all night, and so the lights spilling out, and you know, the implication was it didn't meet code, and my opinion was, well, there's no code regulating that. But, and I don't know that there should be, but it's a all this light, it's all cumulative that spills out and ultimately is ruining the dark sky. And where I started with the thing on the, like what the smoke shops are doing around their windows with these bright 5,000K LEDs shining out, that's a quality of life thing too. They're, yeah, you notice them, but it's not very pretty to see. Okay, we kind of moved into item 8 on the agenda with I'm sorry, the call to the audience, item 9.
No, we
kind of
didn't do 7.
Yeah, we didn't do 7 and 8, but we kind of had that. Is there any other, just to wrap up the call to the audience? Maybe we should just do that.
And then do 7.
We have a comment here.
I'm Kate Lawton. I represent the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection as our co-executive director, and I'm authorized to speak on their behalf. I just want to follow up on the comment there around landscape standards, possibly not aligning with these outdoor lighting codes. If we do raise the point more frequently that outdoor lighting is an issue, not simply just for dark skies from an astronomy perspective, but also a human health and environment perspective, that connection will be made more often by the public, by our planners, by our contractors, but that has to happen, right? That point needs to be made. And I did note in the meeting minutes from last time, there was a discussion of what the purpose of the outdoor lighting code was. Human health and environment wasn't touched on. So I do think we need to make those points more frequently.
So this is Joe. We do, human health gets debated, gets challenged, but the environment issues I welcome your reminding us, but it was discussed last time. And it is one of the goals of the code. What's unique about this community compared to the average community, is your concerns apply everywhere, is the economic impact of these. So it's an additional, not a substitute for what you're.
That's right.
My name is Kevin Cromwitty. My interest in the lighting code is that I'm an amateur astronomer, and I'm also an environmentalist, and so these are all issues that concern me a lot. Talking to people in my social circles, they're simply not aware that we have a lighting code. I think that awareness, raising public awareness, is a huge issue. I've seen the city run ads on YouTube and put up billboards about issues like water conservation. I've never seen anything about the lighting code. Talking to other amateur astronomers, they don't know. They care about light pollution. They don't know that we have a lighting code. So I think that looking for ways to just, get the fact out there that this is even a thing would probably have a big impact.
They will now?
Kevin, how did you find out about it?
I think it was by accident. I stumbled across the 2012 code, and I was pretty excited to find it. I don't remember exactly what I was looking for when I found it. it was something that I was aware of. And my concern, you know, I live on this in a semi-rural area, 1 acre lots out on the west side. And I've noticed in the last 5 years, and especially the last 1 year, it seems that lights are popping up all over the place. The light pollution is noticeably greater over my house, and I'm seeing changes in animal behavior. I used to see a lot of owls in my neighborhood, and I don't see them very often anymore, although I saw one last night, which was pretty cool. So yeah, I think if maybe there's some way to partner with something like TEP, you know, if they just put something in their mailings that they send out anyway. I don't know. I had some other ideas, and I don't know if these have been raised. Because I'm relatively new, I've never attended a meeting before, and I haven't participated in these.
Before you go on to your other list, I just want to say I welcome your comment because Tucson is, of course, home of what used to be called the International Dark Sky Association and now is Dark Sky International and operates worldwide and has the dark sky places and awards for cities and all these things, and it's in Tucson. And even with that high profile organization, I accept that most people in Tucson probably don't know about it.
And another idea that I had, I don't have any idea how legally feasible it would be, but any retailer in Pima County that sells outdoor lighting could be required to post something about it.
And we've had that discussion. And I wish there was some way of making that happen, but it's like.
So as Dennis mentioned, the former chair of this committee did spend a lot of his time going around and talk to the retail stores, and he would have success, and people, the city and county can't prohibit the sale of the fixtures. They can only prohibit the installation of the fixtures. And so these big chains buy their product for the whole chain. And so even when we get the local person to do it, so, and the staff of the city and county are limited. So we need the public. It's an education challenge, but we need the public.
Yeah, it's a resource thing.
Suggesting that they would be restricted from selling things, but they could be required to.
Obviously, post a notice saying.
Is that something we can do? Or is that gonna require that retailers
I think
post?
it's a challenge to require retailers to post specific information, but I think it would be easier to encourage.
Yeah. So if we made something easy for them to post, they might say yes, as opposed to requiring it.
What we need is an advertising company to come up with a nice flyer that's big enough, you know, that could be posted in stores, but could also be used as part of a campaign. You know, they could put it in with the water bills or something.
We do have a comment online, a hand raised, but before we get off, I just wanted to make sure that Kevin had all of his comments. I thought.
Yes, thank you.
I will look into what I can put together with some public awareness and work and see what we can do through the IEI.
Go ahead, online.
Hi, I think you're referring to me. Am I the only one with the hand raised? My name is Paula Redinger. I'm a Pima County Master Naturalist, and I'm also involved with Dark Sky Southern Arizona. I wanted to first reiterate what the representative from the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection mentioned. I heard at today's meeting more than once comments about wider support of this. I assume that to mean public support. And I would agree, human health and the effects of this lighting on human health and our habitats are important to the public. The greater public doesn't always get why astronomy is important. I, of course, do. But the more you can broaden your target audience for acceptance is better. I was at the November meeting and wildlife came up only very briefly. And as far as human health goes, there's a new study every day that points to the effect on human health. So I don't think it's super controversial at the moment. And back in 2002, I believe it was, there was finding that the eye has a third kind of receptor for this blue light that sets the circadian rhythm. So this certainly applies to our conversation about the light color. Back to wildlife, I mentioned at the last meeting, my thoughts about the lighting areas and also including the Desert Conservation Plan wildlife corridors. So I just wanted to reiterate that. On the motion sensing, the lights going on and off in the parking lots, a lot of public perception is a understandable knee-jerk perception about safety. But if lights are going on, that indicates motion, and that's arguably more safe than just lights on all day without any indication. And then on a personal level, I just want to support the conversation about flagpole lights. We are currently blasted all night, every night through our windows from a light that's a residential flagpole light that's across a wash, which is difficult. And then, sorry, one more comment, and I know this is a lot, so I'm happy to email it all. There also have been a lot of mentions about things only being addressed if there's a complaint, but I don't know that there's a easy way for the public to find out how to make such a complaint. It's still not included in the drop-down list of the Tucson code complaints. You might be able to do it through the county, but if you're in the city, sometimes the county says, nope, you're in the city, complain to the city. So I'm not sure if the public even knows how to make a complaint. So anyway, I thank you for your ear. That was a lot.
Buell, thank you, Paula. I did check, and there is a web complaint form, but I'm involved in managing our department at the University of Arizona's web pages, and it doesn't matter how often we try to improve it. Every time we think we've improved it, we get feedback it's not good enough. So I appreciate you reminding the city and county that maybe they should check that the complaint form is still accessible.
There's a drop-down box of types of complaints you can choose from, and lighting is not included. That's specifically what I meant.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So with regard to the online complaint form, I have only used it once. I try to talk to my neighbors before I file a complaint. My experience with it was I filed a complaint on September 8th, and I received a confirmation email with the reference number, and I called the phone number in mid-October to ask when I could expect a response. They had no record of my report on the website. So it was finally entered into PRO, Property Research Online, dated October 24th, so 46 days after I applied it online. So I don't know if I only have a point. I don't know if there's a communication problem there.
Thank you.
Excuse me, just very briefly, two things. One is during the pandemic, the county came up with a program, it's kind of voluntary, called Ready for You. And restaurants were having a difficult time and eating establishments, and you may still see some stickers on doors. And it reminded me in the conversation of voluntary compliance or getting a word out of dark skies compliance, whatever it might be, that might be a model to look at. It was a Ready for You program, and somewhat successful, I think, in trying to educate the public as to what was going on. And the last is just a question as to why, with a new consultant that took a lot of time to hire and probably at great expense, why is not a representative of the consultant here to hear this conversation? I know it'll be taped and they could go back, but reality is they probably won't, and you'll have to converse with them after about highlights. So why is there no consultant here at this
They
meeting?
were not available on this date. They were available on the first meeting date we had set up, January 15th, I believe it was. And we were asked by the chair to change the date. They had prior commitments. That's part of our discussion on item number 8.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Dan. Well, it's just that I was looking forward to meeting them, and I think it may expedite continued work to have them involved in these issues.
Yes, sir. Richard.
just to express sentiment of the two groups that I'm involved with, the Observatory Consortium and Dark Sky, Southern Arizona Dark Sky. We'd really like to encourage you to consider our sense of urgency in actually completing the document. The reason why things are looking brighter is because, you know, the 13-year-old code hasn't kept up with this change of technology. And so however you can expedite your process to come to consensus and get a new version, even imperfect, would be greatly appreciated.
I know I'm feeling that, and I think when we get to item 8 in the agenda, that's gonna get talked about.
We thought we were done at one point,
Yeah, we thought 2 years ago that we had a version.
and then everyone else wanted to comment about it. All this.
Which is good.
So it's set us back a skosh.
I think the hardest thing that I still haven't heard a consensus about is whether we go with the multiple table approach as a function of lighting fixture or a multiplicative factor. In other words, there seems to be a consensus, okay, the LED lights are different from low pressure sodium or high pressure sodium. We have to do something, but exactly how you accommodate that has been challenging. And I think Dennis's suggestion of getting the consultant to help us
Let
validate.
them crunch it.
Let them
my own
independently
crunch,
crunch
let
some
them do it.
numbers and
See what they come back with.
yes, that might help.
Item 7, we had a discussion about observatory tours.
Sorry, I just want to make sure there was one written comment in the chat. I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure it got read during open comment.
Yeah.
Christina, can you read that, please?
Yeah, it looks like, Laney Levick said, my neighbor recently installed a motion sensor floodlight on his garage, which is located close to my property line. The light comes on when I am in the driveway over 50 feet away and blinds me. The new code does not address this instance.
So I would have thought this would be the classic light trespass, so that they could complain under the current code.
Yeah, I think that should reasonably generate a complaint, and I think if code enforcement were to see it, you're probably gonna see floodlights that are not aimed to where within the prescriptive limits. But also they've got a sensor that is aimed too high. Most of those commercially available products, the sensors are on a ball swivel, as is the lamps themselves, and if they're not aimed right, they'll be too sensitive. Yeah, I drive by one, I'm probably, I feel like I'm 100 feet away from it. So I drive home every time I make this one curve, the light comes on across the street and it's aimed way over like a floodlight from the house. It's rampant. It's everywhere. It's that way.
And those are a lot of the complaints that we do get through code enforcement. Been getting some commercial ones, few residential. I've got probably about 8 code complaints on just like lighting problems and trespass. So we do get them through code enforcement. How they get to us, I do not know the system. I'm on the end.
Quite frankly, I'm of the opinion that our present code even addresses that enough. And it's truly just an enforcement thing.
And that's,
And it's, you know, it's limited resources on the part of city and county. They only have so many dollars to spend on this stuff. And there's so many people and it just takes time.
those
but-
are the codes that I do use for
but
reference
every-
to current ones.
Am I correct in saying every time there is a complaint, it's supposed to get investigated? It may take time to do so, but it's supposed to be investigated. I know we heard that response in the past. But today we're hearing made a complaint, but it, no acknowledgement of.
There's, I believe, 11 of us, and that they're looking to bring on 2 or 3 more. I only have a 6-month period here, but all complaints that do come in are assigned to somebody. I think some of the problems are a lot of these other inspectors don't know as well as I do. And that's my job here, is to take back and try and teach them so we get a better and a more level playing field when somebody else goes out or after I leave. And we will work also with Clayton's group. So we get the permitting, all that understanding together so we have a uniform pattern. But we do investigate, not just lighting complaints. They have a lot of other complaints. And there's levels of groups that can do those based on their knowledge and training. Trying to bring it up, use this stuff. We do utilize the codes. I even print them when I send them.
And if you are correct, if that was a county complaint, I would like to know about that. If it was to the county, so I can follow up on that.
Yours.
I would have to, I might be able to answer that in a moment. I can look in my email because I saved it emails you a PDF when you fill out the form online.
Yeah.
So I can look up what that came from.
Okay, no, that'd be great, because if that was the case, I do need to follow up on it. But Dennis, and to answer your question is yes, we do investigate.
And that's been my sense, and that's been the consistent response we've gotten is if somebody does file a complaint and, using the method that is available, that it does get followed up. And not every complaint is resolved though to the satisfaction of the person who complained, because sometimes things are not against code. I think we can move on to agenda item 7, but I'm not sure we have anything to talk about. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I do have some comments that still in the chat.
Oh, okay. Why don't we go?
One comment was how to actually file a complaint. I can see where the city has a drop down, and it may be a good place to put it behind signs. So we can share that in the link. We'll share that link in the chat. And then,
That's starting with TucsonAZ.gov. And
yes, that's the city code complaint. I'm not sure about the Pima County complaint. And then if you want to be added to any lists for the meetings, we actually provide that on our website. But if you could please provide your email, I'll get that information out to you. And this is Angie. Would the exterior maintenance topic be appropriate? Can you maybe elaborate on that question?
Paula, you're still muted.
Apologies, I was typing. I was just back at the code enforcement webpage. I thought maybe exterior maintenance would be the best topic at this point in time. But you mentioned, what was it, signs?
Maybe putting it behind signs.
What do you mean behind? Why can't it just be a separate?
Well, I can't speak for code enforcement,
Okay.
but
My recommendation, I don't think that this committee doesn't tell the county or the city how to enforce things.
Okay, thank you.
Would make more sense to me than somebody having to associate lighting with signs or something else.
Any other comments?
I have
Oh,
the
go ahead.
answer to the question about
Oh,
my
okay.
report. I apparently filed it on the city website because the response I received was from laserfish@TucsonAZ.gov. And I filed it as zoning. This may be what Paula was talking about. There wasn't something specifically for lighting, so I thought the best fit was zoning. And the email, the PDF that it sent me said EGSD code enforcement violation report, and it had City of Tucson logo.
I believe you're in the county, are you not?
I'm sorry,
Believing you're in the county, are you?
I am
not?
within the city
I am
limits.
sick, okay.
Okay, that should be appropriate.
Our CSRs and how they're zoning and other stuff, we're working with them because they have to be understanding and training. They take the complaints in and then they assign them as such.
Would it be possible for you to just check with them to make sure that the case is active?
Yes, I
Thank
will. I may even have his, I don't know.
I think that's all.
That's all the comments. Okay, so we need to back up to, our item number 7, discussion observatory tours.
Right, that was something that was, I was asked to help. In talking to Daniel and Clayton, I was asked to create, I made an offer at the last meeting that I'd be happy to set up tours for the consultants and for others. And this is on the agenda to allow us to talk about it publicly. There are 3 types of tours that I'd be very happy to help set up. One could be available to the public, up to a certain maximum number of people up on Mount Lemon, using one of our telescopes up there for the same program we do as the nighttime observing program. But it would also allow, we wanted to, the reason we need to discuss this is I want to do this in a way that the new members of the Outdoor Lighting Code Committee could also get up to see telescopes if they haven't, and see what the lighting looks like from one of the observatory sites. So we have 3 different sites where we can easily do tours. The easiest one is Mount Lemon. Kitt Peak is also possible. And then the MMT, which is one of the larger telescopes in the area, but still close, on Mount Hopkins. The MMT, we'd have to take the smallest number of people. It's just a smaller space. It's logistically harder. Mount Lemon, again, we could do something where we reserve the first 15 spots of the 40 that are open to the public. And I was hoping that by making it open to the public, and if there's no business, then as many of the Outdoor Lighting Code Committee members could at once. If that's not possible, we have to do it twice, so that two groups of 3 or something. I don't know. So I wanted to gauge interest of staff. I'd be very happy to do one just for the 11 inspectors. But I wanted to get feedback on interest. Doing it like this month is not always a great idea because you can get snow like we might be getting today. But we could schedule it, and as long as I have everybody's contact information, if a snowstorm came in, we've canceled it. So the goal of this is it's so much easier for people to understand what we're talking about. If you've seen, oh, that's the light scattering off the air above the telescope, as opposed to Dennis or me or somebody else waving our hands. So I'm sure, so how many, I guess, imperfect polling method, if you could drive yourself up to Mount Lemon and spend 2.5 hours with us from like 6 p.m. to 8:30, how many people would be interested in doing that? And if we could provide a van where we drove you up, would you be more interested or not?
That's not a concern.
Not a concern. But
It really depends on how soon it'll be. I'm so slammed with my work now for another month or
It's gonna
so.
be that way till you're retired. huh?
I don't know. I'm hoping it'll slow down later.
Yeah.
So is there interest from the city and county staff? Okay. How many people would be interested in the MMT? Okay,
That's a cool one.
they're all cool, but that's the largest, that's the largest.
360. See all the little towns in southern Arizona.
That is true. The building does rotate. Okay, so Clayton and Daniel, Angie wants to go. What do you recommend as the way for me to publicize this? Do we give it to you and then we post it somehow, or you send it to your mailing list for the meeting, or?
This is Clayton. So I would recommend that it is open to the public with a limit on the number of committee members, just so that we don't violate open meeting law. And I would recommend that it's really an RSVP basis where we can post it on the website.
And
I could distribute information, but it's really the public.
Can you circulate it to the supervisors and city council members and make sure they know they're welcome to join too?
I
Or do I have to do
don't know if that's the best course of action.
All right.
Personally, simply because we could quickly get into one of those situations where we're also violating public meeting.
I see.
Them, because they also have same limitations.
deal.
So, but they could go up by themselves? They could go up in a group of one. Is that right?
They could.
Okay, so I think if you could extend an invitation to them that we can arrange for them to get their own tour. Ultimately, they're gonna have to weigh in on whether they support the new code. So it would be, I mean, I guess I could reach out to them individually anyway. So I'll focus on the public one. But I'd like to reserve, say, the first 10 for city and county staff so that it doesn't get into the situation of just because the public respond. I guarantee you the public will respond for when it's free, they'll respond. So, okay, any other questions on this? We'll try to do this between middle of February and end of March. And we'll try to have more than one. Thank you, Dennis.
Item 8, future agenda items and meeting schedule. First of all, for agenda items, I think our agenda is probably pretty good if we would keep it going forward for the next meeting. Regarding meeting schedule, I think the first question is, what is our end time goal? As I understand it, other committees that would correlate with this, like the Consolidated Code Committee, is working toward February, end of February to wrap things up. Are we at the same schedule?
This is Clayton. The Lighting Code Committee is not on the same schedule, so there is no expectation that they match the schedule of another committee. But obviously there is some interest in making forward progress. It is definitely the city's recommendation that moving forward, we pick a specific day, like the second Tuesday of, the month or something similar to where people can begin to plan moving forward, and we can start to line out a schedule.
I think historically we were on Wednesdays, weren't we?
Yeah, it was the second Wednesday. of the
Second
month.
Wednesday.
And
But I'm on the Consolidated Code Committee, which is Tuesday morning, so I got to make sure there's not a conflict.
Sure.
It'd help me if they were not on consecutive days also.
so perhaps a third Wednesday.
Yeah, something like that may work better for me.
Third Wednesday, you said.
Yes, I just said third Wednesday, but it was a suggestion.
Schedule is perfect. Pick a date, we know ahead and everyone plans for it.
Yeah.
Everybody can schedule around it.
And a suggested time.
Sorry.
A suggested time.
9 AM.
It's historically been 9 AM. I know we tried some early evening, like 5:30s for a while to try to get more public involvement, but it doesn't seem to change much.
We actually, I think, have more people at this meeting right now today than we did when we tried the last.
Yeah.
Used to come into beer time. Next, third Thursday, or third Wednesday of the month in February would be the 19th.
I think
I
Third
can't,
Wednesday's the 12th, I believe.
I could make
February.
12, but I couldn't make.
You can make
Hi,
it
Rob.
12th, but you can't
Oh,
make
you're
it
right.
19th. Well, then historically, then we're gonna have to change that third Wednesday of the month then.
well, then.
And that conflicts with Dennis.
Well, it doesn't actually conflict. It's just easier if I don't have two consecutive meetings, but I'll deal with it.
I mean, if we have more frequent meetings for a little while, we might have to finish.
Yeah, I think it's more important to get as many of us here as we can when we have these meetings.
That's right.
And so I'll try to.
Who are we missing today?
Amy. And I don't know if she got caught up with the federal funding freeze or something.
We're missing another member.
Adam?
Yeah.
Alex Zimmerman. Amy did send an email. You guys might not have seen it. She got stuck in Phoenix because of a flight delay. So she was just getting ready to board.
Well, are
On a
we,
side note, the 19th is also the Tucson Rodeo. I'm obviously, that affects me.
But the rodeo
No,
parade
yeah.
will be over with.
I'm not worried about the parade. I'm
Be
on
about the rodeo.
the 19th, we're putting on a concert. I will be starting at 2
Well, it
o'clock.
sounds like the 12th is a better date, so why don't we plan for that?
So the consensus would be the second Tuesday or the second Wednesday of every month at 9 AM.
Let's,
No, because that'll conflict.
no, I'm okay.
deal with it.
I'll deal with it. I'm
You
okay.
All right.
I'm okay.
So
Because I don't know how much longer the consolidated code committee is gonna go. They're supposed to wrap up pretty soon if they're gonna keep on schedule, so.
Fingers crossed.
I think the 12th is the right day, but I would have to leave before the end of the meeting on the 12th, just by about 15 minutes.
And I don't know if we'll go as long next time or not.
Depends on what information we get back from the
Well,
consultant.
We need a chair to run the meeting.
No, you did a great job. Thank you.
How do we connect with a consultant with our questions or concerns? Give to you and to Dan?
Sure.
Okay, I think maybe Craig and Amy and I just ought to go over my list one more. One more.
But you were also gonna send that out so we could
Yeah,
add to it.
okay.
I mean, I will try not to add to it, but.
Yeah, all right. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. When I get back to my office, I'll email that out and then everybody will have it, comment back, and then we'll have a list.
Just keep in mind, if you email the list to the committee members, you can't reply all,
Also, reply individually,
That's right. Or,
just to me.
or you can.
or
send it
you
to
could
us.
send it individually to us and then we
Right.
reply to you and then you give it to the subcommittee.
Okay,
It's in,
yeah, I get, yeah.
avoid risking public meeting law if you send it through us. We're not,
I want to do the right thing. It's just all the
thing.
rules.
Yeah. You can appreciate it.
I can't.
Okay, last item, adjournment. And then,
Did you finish and call the audience too?
yes, we did.
I make a motion, we adjourn?
Second.
You're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
11:22.
Beat the